Friday, 8 in the evening. I sat alone by the window in my quiet living room, the only sound the steady ticking of the clock. Ever since I lost my husband, silence moved in and never left. Usually, at the end of the week, I looked forward to a call or at least a message from Jonathan, my only son. Despite his busy life as a lawyer, he had always made time for me. I reached for my phone, hoping I hadn't missed anything. The screen lit up, a new message from him. With a warm feeling in my chest, I opened it, expecting an invitation like always. Fridays had long been our tradition, dinners together, even after his wedding. But the words staring back at me felt like a slap. "You're not invited to dinner. My wife doesn't want you there." I read and reread the message, unable to believe it. Was this some mistake? Some joke? I tried to make sense of it, but I couldn't. Hot tears welled up as I held the phone to my chest. For the first time in a long while, I realized how painful loneliness could be, not just quiet, but bitter and sharp. I couldn't sleep at all that night. My mind kept spinning in circles. What did I do wrong? Had I offended Sarah, Jonathan's wife, somehow? I searched through memories, replaying every family dinner, every comment or glance, wondering if I'd overstepped without realizing. Morning came dull and gray, despite the summer sun. I made myself coffee. It didn't help. The house felt even emptier, my heart heavier with every passing minute. I paced from room to room, starting chores and abandoning them, unable to shake the ache inside me. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, I picked up my phone again. Maybe Jonathan had written, to apologize, to explain. But the screen was blank. No new messages. No words to soften the blow. With trembling hands, I decided to call him. The phone rang and rang, each tone stretching my nerves, until his voicemail picked up, "Leave a message after the beep." His voice was calm, unmoved, almost like a stranger's. My throat closed, I couldn't speak at all. I just sat there gripping the phone, swallowing my words, and then quietly hung up. It felt more and more like I was a stranger in my own family. The day dragged on endlessly, as if time itself was holding its breath. Restless, I wandered through the house and finally settled down with a box of old photographs, pictures of Jonathan as a child, his bright smile at school recitals, his first day at college, his wedding with Sarah. I remembered that morning so clearly. I wore my soft blue dress, wanting to match the wedding's colors, trying to be a good mother, a welcome guest. We laughed and posed for family photos, and I believed I would never be lonely again. One picture caught my eye, the three of us together, grinning around the dinner table. Tears burned as I traced our faces with my finger. What had changed? When did I become an outsider? Hour by hour, the bitterness grew. Was I no longer allowed to be a part of my son's life? Was everything now decided by someone else, by his wife, someone who still felt like a stranger to me? I reached for paper, my heart pounding, and tried to write Jonathan a real letter. Not a message on the phone, but honest words pulling from someplace deep. My hand shook as I wrote, "Dear Jonathan, if I've hurt you or Sarah in any way, I'm truly sorry." I stopped there, the words failing me. How could I explain the ache of wanting my son close again? How could I hold on to someone who seemed to be slipping further away with every new day? I didn't finish the letter. I tucked the paper quietly back in a drawer, unable, just yet, to say goodbye to hope or to my pain. As evening settled and dusk crept slowly over the city, I realized I couldn't bear to sit alone with my heavy thoughts any longer. I decided to take a walk. The summer air was cool and carried a hint of comfort as tree branches whispered above me, like gentle voices trying to soothe my heart. I walked slowly, lost in memories, Jonathan gripping my hand as a little boy, wobbling on his bike in this very park, always glancing back to make sure I was there. Now, we felt like strangers, and I couldn't trace when it had all changed. Along the path, I ran into my old friend, Marjorie. We hadn't seen each other in ages, but the look in her kind eyes understood everything before I spoke a word. We sat together on a nearby bench. "You look troubled," she said gently. At first, I tried to say something casual, but couldn't hold back. The story spilled out, about Jonathan's message, about Sarah. Marjorie squeezed my hand, strong and reassuring in only the way a longtime friend can. Sons don't always know how hard it is to be between a mother and a wife. Don't blame yourself too quickly. Sometimes, it just takes time. Her words brought a small sense of relief. The ache in my chest didn't disappear, but I felt a little less alone in it. As I walked back home beneath the soft streetlights, I let a small thread of hope take root inside me. Maybe, not all was lost. Maybe the hardest conversation with Jonathan was still ahead, but perhaps, in time, our family could find each other again. Several days slipped by. The house felt quieter than ever, no voices, no ringing phone, not even the thud of mail in the box. To occupy myself, I dusted old shelves, sorted through stacks of forgotten magazines, made cinnamon tea. But loneliness clung to the simplest tasks. On a kitchen shelf, I stumbled across my old notebook, lists of birthdays, recipes, little reminders. One line jumped out, "Dinner at Jonathan's, bring apple pie." Reading it was like a knife twisting in my chest. I remembered how recently I'd still delighted in cooking for him, feeling useful, wanted. That evening, huddled beneath a knitted throw, I listened to the wind outside and wondered, would he ever call? Would I ever get an explanation? Or was I now meant to always wait and guess, what had really gone wrong? As if in answer to my silent questions, the phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, but answered anyway. "Hello?" A careful, quiet voice replied. "Mrs. Hill?" "It's Sarah." My heart skipped a beat. "I was hoping we could talk," she said softly. "May I come by tonight?" "Just me, without Jonathan." A storm of emotions swept through me, hurt, anxiety, and a flicker of hope. Should I let her come, or say no? I hesitated for several long seconds before I managed to answer. "Come by, Sarah. I'll be here." Inside, I felt a trembling uncertainty. At last, I might learn why I'd been pushed out of my own family. I couldn't sit still as I waited for Sarah. I didn't even make tea. I wasn't sure how to greet my daughter-in-law, coming alone after sending such a message. 1,000 questions swirled. What would she say? Why had she needed to see me now? When Sarah arrived, she looked fragile and tired, her eyes red, her fingers nervously twisting her purse strap. We walked quietly to the living room. I gestured for her to sit, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke, a pause heavy with things unsaid. Sarah's voice faltered. She stared at the floor. I'm sorry for coming like this. I don't know how to begin. I nodded. I wasn't sure how to begin either. It wasn't Jonathan, she blurted suddenly. It was me who insisted you shouldn't come to dinner. I gripped the arm of my chair. But why, Sarah? What happened? Did I do something wrong? Sarah shut her eyes, gathering courage. Things have been hard for me lately. I know you and Jonathan have your Friday dinners, and he adores your apple pie. But recently, I started to feel like I don't really belong in my own home. Like I can't breathe, can't find support. She glanced up, guilt shimmering in her eyes. Sometimes it felt like I was the outsider, even in my own house. I'm sorry. I just thought that if you didn't come, maybe it would get easier. Listening, my pain softened into surprise. Across from me sat another lost woman, tangled in her role, wife, hostess, just as in need as I was. Strangely, I didn't feel angry, but an unexpected tenderness. Sarah, I understand, I said gently, my voice trembling a little. Sometimes, I think we both feel left out. She looked at me, emotion sparking for the first time that evening. Silence returned, both of us wondering what might come next. We sat in silence. I studied Sarah, really seeing her for the first time, not just as my son's wife, but as a young woman uncertain of her place, struggling with her own doubts. Inside me, the hurt began to melt into something softer, more compassionate. I remembered being a young bride myself, stepping into my husband's family, always second-guessing, desperate to belong, never sure which words or gestures might be wrong. Sarah forced a shaky smile. I always feel like I'm losing some invisible contest with you. Jonathan keeps saying, sometimes without meaning to, how wonderful you made everything, how you ran the household, how good your meals were. I can never seem to match that. Every time you came over, I felt like a stranger at my own table. Suddenly, I understood, her distance wasn't about me, but about her own loneliness. This was the drama of two women, each afraid of being pushed aside, each longing for something precious, a sense of belonging. Sarah, you don't have to be me, I said softly, my voice almost trembling. This is your home now, your family. I don't want to take the life you're building away. I just love my son. I only wanted to be helpful, to have a place in his life too. She offered a faint, nervous laugh. I love him too. Sometimes I just need to feel like I come first for him. We understood each other, wordlessly. Every home has its shadows, jealousy, exhaustion, misunderstanding. But sitting together now, a fragile thread of trust was beginning to form between us. The hardest question remained, How could we protect each other, protect Jonathan, and not lose ourselves in the process? Sarah looked at me, tentative hope flickering in her eyes. Maybe, would you teach me to make your apple pie? I laughed through tears. Of course, Sarah. We can start there. For the first time in many days, it felt like maybe, just maybe, there was more ahead for us both than loneliness. There was a chance to be accepted anew, if only we could meet each other halfway. The following day, I prepared for Sarah's visit with new purpose, not as a guest, but as someone I might actually call family. I took down my old recipe book, gathered bowls and measuring cups, cinnamon and flour, even dug out my apron with the fading embroidered apple on the front. When Sarah arrived, she was a little more relaxed, a spark of hope in her eyes that hadn't been there before. We exchanged awkward smiles, but they felt more genuine, like two people just beginning to trust. As we began to make the apple pie together, something shifted. I showed her how to pick the juiciest apples, how to work the dough so it would breathe under her fingertips. Sarah listened, followed, sometimes fumbling, sometimes laughing at her mistakes. In her laughter, the old tension vanished, a weight beginning to lift, for both of us. We talked about simple things. I told her stories, Jonathan's favorite childhood movies, how he'd once mixed paprika into my cake instead of cinnamon and ruined it with innocent mischief. Sarah listened, smiling, a listener now, not a rival. I realized then that loving the same person doesn't have to divide us. There could be different ways to belong in his life. As the pie went into the oven, the warm, sweet aroma filled the kitchen, the unmistakable scent of comfort, of home. Sarah's voice interrupted the quiet. Thank you for letting me in, for not shutting me out. I was afraid you'd never forgive me for all of this. I looked at her warmly. It's not about apologies. It's about wanting to try, to understand each other. About being there, for Jonathan, for this family. We fell silent, listening to the rustle of the oven. That night, amid the scent of baking apples, something fragile and precious took root, a real bond, new and tentative, but finally real, between two women who had stopped being adversaries. With the pie browning in the oven, Sarah and I stayed at the kitchen table, letting the gentle hope between us settle. For the first time in so many months, I felt lighter inside, as if a weight had begun to lift, that maybe things could be different, after all. Staring out the window, Sarah asked quietly, would it upset you if Jonathan never found out I visited you like this? I just don't want him to feel guilty, or caught between us. I hesitated. Part of me longed for Jonathan to know about my hurt, to see the effort I was making. But in that moment, I understood, if all we do is fight for our rights to our loved ones, we might lose our family entirely. I won't mind, Sarah, I said gently. Let's keep this just between us. What matters is we understand each other now. A look of gratitude softened her face. It means so much to me to have Jonathan's mom, and maybe find a real family for myself, too. My own mother is far away. I miss having people close. I reached over and gave her hand a gentle squeeze. I know what it's like. I remember being a young daughter-in-law too, always afraid of doing something wrong. But real family isn't about having no misunderstandings, it's about being willing to talk about them, to try again. The scent of baked apples flooded the kitchen just then. Sarah suddenly grinned. We'd better check the pie before our first one together burns. Opening the oven, I realized we were both just beginning to learn how to be a mother to an adult son, how to welcome a new woman into the family. Those roles weren't easy. But I was starting to believe, if we could reach toward one another, instead of retreating in pain, maybe we could create something new, something fragile but precious. That evening, with the promise of apple pie and tentative forgiveness, I knew this was our very first step towards something like healing, a hope that our family could still be made whole, in a new way. A couple of weeks after Sarah and I baked our first pie together, Jonathan finally called. "Mom, we'd really love for you to come to dinner on Sunday. Sarah asked especially for you. She says she has a surprise planned." There was something new and a little uncertain in his voice, like he'd been wanting to say this but couldn't find the way. I paused, just for a second, as a fragile hope fluttered in my chest. That evening, I took extra care choosing what to wear, just like I used to for his graduations or the first time I met Sarah. Despite the nervous excitement, I kept worrying, what if everything went wrong again? But as soon as I stepped into their home, I felt the atmosphere was different. Sarah greeted me at the door and hugged me, genuinely, tightly, not just from politeness, but as if she truly meant it. From the kitchen drifted the scent of cinnamon and apples. On the table sat an apple pie, my recipe, the one Sarah and I had learned to make together. Jonathan looked happy, a bit shy, like he couldn't quite process how peaceful and warm things felt at last. We sat down to dinner together, laughed at family stories, told old jokes. For the first time, I realized I no longer felt like an intruder in my son's life. My being there didn't cause discomfort, it brought a sense of unity, of home. At one point, Sarah looked at me, shy but beaming, and said, "I could never have made this pie taste just right without your help. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for opening your heart to me." I smiled, realizing the ache of the past weeks had begun to fade. As the evening wound down, Jonathan squeezed my hands and said softly, "Mom, thank you for never giving up on our family. I see now how much that means." On my way home, city lights blurring through grateful tears, I recognized that my solitude was gone. My heart, tender and a little scarred, had made space again. I had found my place, right beside my son, his wife, and a future not defined by loss, but by the love we'd all fought so hard to preserve. Life doesn't promise us an easy road. But if we choose to reach out, to forgive, to embrace change, even the most wounded heart can learn to believe in happiness, and in the power of love to heal, transform, and create something stronger than before. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support means so much, and it helps us bring you more stories. Share your thoughts in the comments, we'd love to hear your experiences. Thank you for being with us.